The transport vessel hummed softly as it entered the atmosphere of Corexus Prime, a neutral hub world that glittered with cities of alien architecture and bustling life. Riya peered out the window, her face a mask of quiet determination. It had been a long journey from Earth, both physically and emotionally. Humans were a rare sight in the wider galaxy these days. After the Syndian Wars devastated Earth's infrastructure and its people, most humans had retreated to their homeworld to rebuild. Riya, however, had left. She wasn't just looking for an education, she was looking for a place to prove herself. The announcement system crackled, and a melodic voice in multiple languages informed the passengers that they were moments away from docking. Riya pulled her jacket tighter, trying to block out the nervous energy thrumming through her. Her seat vibrated as the ship made contact with the docking bay. Passengers of all species began to unbuckle and stand, their movements fluid and unhurried despite the press of bodies and baggage. Riya waited for the aisle to clear before standing, feeling the weight of the stares from the other passengers. Humans always drew attention. Her first steps into Hextar Academy were as overwhelming as she'd feared. The campus stretched across a vast expanse, its design a seamless blend of nature and advanced technology. Trees with bioluminescent leaves lined pathways paved with a shimmering, self-repairing material. Buildings floated slightly above the ground, anchored by anti-gravity stabilizers that gave the entire place an ethereal quality. The air smelled faintly metallic, with a hint of ozone. Riya took a deep breath, gripping her bag strapped tightly as she walked toward the orientation hall. The hall was massive, shaped like a vast dome that shimmered with holographic projections of the galaxy. Hundreds of students milled about, chatting in dozens of languages. Riya felt like a small star in a massive constellation, her presence barely registering among the myriad beings around her. Her heart sank when she realized how few other humans there were. As the ceremony concluded, Riya followed the flow of students out into the main hallway. She tried to avoid eye contact, but it didn't matter. Whispers followed her. Some were curious, others derisive. "Is that a human?" a low voice muttered. "Didn't think they still left their planet," someone else snickered. Riya kept walking, her gaze fixed ahead. She had learned long ago that responding to such comments only gave them power. But as she rounded a corner, she almost collided with someone. Looking up, she met the silver eyes of a tall Zeykan male. "Watch it, human," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. His spiny crest flared slightly, a Zeykan's natural response to irritation. "Sorry," Riya said evenly, stepping aside. The Zeykan's lip curled. "What's a primitive like you doing here? This isn't some backwater colony school." Riya stared at him for a moment, then shrugged. "Guess you'll find out soon enough." The Zeykan's companions laughed, but there was an edge of unease in their voices. He leaned in closer, his height making him tower over her. "Don't get too comfortable. You'll learn your place soon." Riya didn't flinch. She'd dealt with bullies before, though none quite as physically intimidating at times. Instead of replying, she stepped around him and continued on her way. The dormitory was quieter than she expected, its design minimal yet luxurious. Her room was a compact space with adaptive furniture that adjusted to her preferences. As she unpacked, she replayed the day's events in her mind. She had expected hostility, but the intensity of it caught her off guard. Still, she wouldn't let it deter her. The next morning, Riya arrived at her first class early, hoping to avoid unnecessary interactions. The classroom was a blend of advanced technology and organic materials, with desks that hovered a few inches above the floor. She chose a seat near the front and pulled out her datapad, pretending to review the syllabus. As students trickled in, she felt the weight of their stares again. Then, as if on cue, the Zeykan from the hallway entered with two others, his presence commanding attention. They settled into the back of the room, their voices low but clearly mocking. "Look, the human's still here," one of them said, loud enough for Riya to hear. Riya ignored them, focusing on the instructor who had just entered. The lesson began, and for a time she lost herself in the material. But every so often she caught snippets of their taunts, their words like tiny needles pricking at her focus. After class, Riya packed her things quickly, hoping to leave before the Zeykans could corner her again. But as she exited the room, she found them waiting. "Hey, human," the leader called, blocking her path. "You don't belong here." Riya met his gaze, her expression neutral. "Is that so?" "Prove you do," he said, his spines flaring slightly. "Tomorrow in the combat arena." The challenge hung in the air like a physical weight. Combat training was one of the Academy's most prestigious programs, a test of strategy, skill, and physical prowess. Riya had planned to ease into it, but now she had no choice. "Fine," she said, her voice steady. "I'll see you there." The Zeykan smirked, clearly not expecting her to accept. "You're going to regret this, human." That night, Riya couldn't sleep. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling as her mind raced. She hadn't wanted to draw attention, but now the entire school would be watching her tomorrow. Her heart pounded as she thought about the Zeykan's speed and strength. But she reminded herself that she had something he didn't, years of training in techniques no one here had ever seen. Riya's father had been a soldier during the Sindian Wars, and he had taught her everything he knew. When Earth was at its lowest, he had told her that survival wasn't enough. They had to excel, to push beyond their limits, and she had taken those words to heart. The next day, the combat arena buzzed with anticipation. Holographic projectors transformed the space into a dense jungle, complete with towering trees and uneven terrain. Riya stood in the center, her combat suit adjusting to her form. Across from her, the Zeykan loomed, his confidence radiating from every movement. The simulation began with a loud buzz. The Zeykan wasted no time, charging at Riya with astonishing speed. The crowd gasped as he closed the distance in seconds. But Riya was ready. She sidestepped at the last moment, her movements fluid and precise. The Zeykan stumbled slightly, surprised. Riya didn't give him time to recover. She darted into the shadows of the holographic jungle, using the terrain to her advantage. For several minutes, the Zeykan stalked her, his frustration growing with each missed attack. Riya moved like a ghost, always one step ahead. Finally, when he lunged again, she struck. Her kick connected with his chest, sending him sprawling. The audience erupted in murmurs. No one had expected a human to land a blow on a Zeykan. The Zeykan roared, his spines flaring as he unleashed a barrage of energy blasts. Riya dodged gracefully, her training kicking in, but she knew she couldn't rely on evasion forever. As the Zeykan prepared another attack, Riya drew on the one skill she had kept hidden. She channeled her energy, a golden light glowing faintly around her hands. When the Zeykan charged again, she unleashed it in a controlled burst, the force knocking him to the ground. The arena fell silent. The Zeykan struggled to his feet, his expression a mix of fury and disbelief. "What are you?" he demanded. Riya stood tall, her breathing steady despite the exertion. "I'm human," she said, her voice carrying across the arena, "and I belong here." The crowd erupted into cheers, and for the first time since arriving, Riya felt a flicker of hope. She had proven herself. But as she left the arena, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Her journey at Hextar Academy was far from over. The transport vessel hummed softly as it entered the upper atmosphere of Corexis Prime, a neutral hub world known for its harmony of technology and nature. Riya leaned against the cool window, watching as the sprawling cities below sparkled like constellations against the twilight terrain. The structures, built with materials far beyond Earth's capabilities, shimmered and hovered, their anti-gravity bases keeping them in a constant state of elegant suspension. Ships of every shape and size moved in intricate patterns, their sleek forms reflecting the pale sunlight that pierced through the thin, cloudless sky. This was her first time leaving Earth, her first real step into the galaxy that, until now, had been an abstract idea glimpsed through news feeds and history lessons. Earth, still recovering from the Sindian Wars, had long been a diminished player in galactic affairs. Its resources had been ravaged, its people left to rebuild in the shadows of civilizations more advanced, more powerful. Riya had grown up amidst the ruins, but she'd always dreamed of something bigger. Now she was here, stepping into the unknown. As the vessel made its final descent, the atmosphere inside grew charged. Aliens of all shapes and sizes adjusted their belongings, some stretching elongated limbs while others communicated in low, buzzing hums. Riya clutched her bag, the fabric worn and familiar in her hands, and rose when the vessel docked. The terminal was vast and alien in every sense of the word. Riya stepped into a space filled with beings from across the galaxy. The air smelled strange, metallic and sharp, with undertones of sweet, unfamiliar spices. Voices in dozens of languages overlapped, creating a symphony of sound that was both exhilarating and overwhelming. Riya adjusted the strap of her bag, willing her heart to steady as she followed the signs to Hextar Academy's transport hub. The journey to the academy was short, but no less overwhelming. The vehicle she boarded was sleek, its walls lined with glowing sigils that hummed faintly, like a melody. As it weaved through Corexis Prime's metropolitan wonderland, Riya tried to process everything. Trees with bioluminescent leaves framed the streets, their glow pulsing faintly in time with the artificial lighting embedded in the pathways. Vehicles floated effortlessly alongside hers, their engines silent and their designs elegant. When the academy came into view, Riya felt her breath hitch. The campus sprawled across the horizon, its buildings glistening under a network of energy fields that refracted light into dazzling colors. Towers twisted and spiraled upward, their shapes defying the laws of physics she had grown up learning. The main building was a domed structure with walls that seemed to ripple, reflecting a constantly shifting view of the galaxy. As she stepped off the transport, she couldn't shake the weight of the stairs. A human was an anomaly here, and she knew it. Humans weren't just rare at Hextar Academy, they were a curiosity, a species known for their perseverance but not their sophistication. Riya ignored the hushed whispers and focused on the task at hand, finding her dormitory and navigating her first day. Her first encounter with her peers was exactly what she had dreaded. The orientation hall was filled with students of all species, each more alien than the last. The room buzzed with voices, and Riya felt distinctly out of place as she moved toward her assigned seat. She caught glimpses of her reflection in the holographic panels lining the walls, small, unassuming, human. The orientation began with a dazzling display of holograms detailing the Academy's history. A narrator's voice boomed across the hall, extolling Hextar Academy as the pinnacle of intergalactic education and leadership training. Riya couldn't help but feel the weight of expectation pressing down on her. When the presentation ended, the students filed out, and that was when the real trial began. The stares grew more pointed, the whispers more audible. She overheard snippets of conversation as she passed. "Is that a human? What are they doing here? I thought Earth was still rebuilding. They let them in now." Riya gritted her teeth and kept walking, refusing to let the words sink in. She was here for a reason, and she wouldn't let their opinions derail her. The moment that solidified her place as a target came during her first class. The instructor, a towering serpent-like being with iridescent scales, had barely finished introducing the syllabus when a voice from the back of the room interrupted. "Are we supposed to slow down the curriculum for her?" Riya turned in her seat to see a tall Zeykan leaning back lazily, his spines flickering in amusement. His silver eyes locked onto hers, and she felt the full weight of his disdain. The instructor's tail flicked in irritation, but they chose not to engage. Riya, however, couldn't let it slide. "I think you'll find I can keep up just fine," she said, her voice even. The Zeykan smirked. "We'll see." His companions laughed, and Riya turned back to face the front, her cheeks burning. She knew better than to rise to their bait, but the damage was done. She had been marked. The days that followed were an exercise in patience. The Zeykan, whose name she learned was Drax, seemed determined to undermine her at every turn. He and his group orchestrated petty humiliations, tampering with her equipment, spreading rumors, and making snide comments in class. The breaking point came when Drax cornered her after a particularly grueling lesson. "Still here, human?" he sneered, his spines flaring slightly. Riya didn't stop walking. "Yes, surprised?" "Not really," he said, falling into step beside her. "Humans are stubborn, I'll give you that. But this isn't the place for you. Why don't you save yourself the trouble and leave? Riya stopped and turned to face him. Why don't you prove I don't belong here? Drax's lips curled into a grin. Tomorrow. Combat arena. Let's see what you're made of. The challenge spread like wildfire. By the next morning, the entire academy seemed to be buzzing with the news of the human who dared to face Drax in the combat simulation. Riya felt the weight of their expectations and doubts as she stepped into the arena. The space was vast, its walls lined with shimmering projectors that could transform the battlefield into any environment. Today, it was a jungle dense, humid, and alive with the sounds of simulated wildlife. Riya stood at one end, adjusting the fit of her combat suit. Across from her, Drax loomed, his confidence radiating from every movement. When the buzzer sounded, Drax moved first. He was fast, much faster than she'd anticipated, and closed the distance between them in seconds. Riya barely dodged his initial strike, rolling to the side as his claws raked the air where she had been standing. The crowd gasped, their murmurs a constant backdrop as Riya darted into the jungle. She needed to think, to strategize. Drax was stronger and faster, but she had agility on her side and something else she hadn't revealed. For several minutes they danced through the jungle. Drax attacked relentlessly, his frustration growing with each missed strike. Riya countered when she could, landing precise blows that, while not powerful, chipped away at his stamina. Finally, when she saw her opening, she unleashed the energy she had been holding back. Golden light burst from her palms, a skill she had honed in secret back on Earth. The force of it sent Drax sprawling, his spines flattening in shock. The arena fell silent as the light faded. Drax struggled to his feet, his expression a mix of fury and disbelief. "What are you?" Riya stood tall, her breathing steady. "I'm human," she said, her voice carrying across the arena. "And I'm not going anywhere." The atmosphere in the academy had shifted. Riya could feel it in the way people looked at her now, some with curiosity, others with thinly veiled resentment. Word of her victory over Drax had spread like wildfire, and with it, the narrative of the human who had dared to challenge a Zeykan and win. For most, she was a spectacle, a momentary distraction in their rigorous schedules. For others, like Drax, she was an affront, a reminder that even those considered lesser could defy expectations. She woke early the morning after the duel, her muscles sore but her mind alert. The adrenaline of the fight still lingered, a sharp contrast to the quiet of her dormitory. Outside her window, the bioluminescent trees swayed in a gentle artificial breeze, their glowing leaves casting faint patterns on her walls. The academy felt different now, as if it had acknowledged her presence in a way it hadn't before. Her first class of the day was Advanced Galactic History, a subject she enjoyed despite its dense material. The lecture hall was vast, with floating desks arranged in concentric circles around a central podium where the instructor is shimmering, translucent being called of electron projected holograms of ancient battles and alliances. As she entered, conversations hushed. All eyes turned to her, some curious, others wary. She kept her head high and took her usual seat near the front, pulling out her datapad as the instructor began. The Zeykan human conflict of 3275 was a turning point in interspecies relations. The Velectron intoned, its voice echoing in the silent hall. Despite their technological disadvantage, humans demonstrated an uncanny ability to adapt, outmaneuvering Zeykan forces in several key battles. Riya felt the weight of the words as well as the weight of the stares. She could feel Drax's gaze burning into the back of her neck, but she refused to turn around. After class, she lingered in the hall, waiting for the crowd to disperse before heading to her next lesson. As she walked, she heard hurried footsteps behind her. "Riya, wait." She turned to see a small, insectoid student scuttling toward her. Their multifaceted eyes reflected the hallway lights, and their thin, clicking voice carried an edge of excitement. "You were incredible yesterday," they said, their mandibles twitching. "The way you moved, the energy blast, it was amazing." Riya smiled, surprised by the enthusiasm. Thanks, I'm Riya. Lorik, the student replied, their antennae bobbing. I've never seen a human fight like that. I didn't even know humans could do that. It's not something I show often, Riya admitted. Well, you should show it more, Lorik said. A lot of people are talking about you. Some are impressed. Others, not so much. Riya nodded, unsurprised. I figured. Lorik leaned closer, their voice dropping. Be careful. Drax isn't the kind to let something like this go. I'll keep that in mind, Riya said. The rest of the day passed uneventfully, though the tension in the air was palpable. She could feel the subtle shifts in the way people interacted with her, some more curious, others more distant. By the time her final class ended, she was eager to retreat to the quiet of her dorm. As she entered her room, her datapad chimed. A message blinked on the screen. It's sender anonymous, you got lucky. Stay out of my way, human dot. She stared at the words, her jaw tightening. The message wasn't a surprise, but it was a reminder that her fight with Drax had only marked the beginning. The next morning, Riya arrived at the combat training center for her scheduled session. The instructor, a hulking, four-armed being named Carson, greeted her with a nod. Riya, he said, his voice gravelly, heard about your match with Drax. Impressive. Thanks, she replied, adjusting her gloves. Let's see if you can keep it up, he said, gesturing toward the training area. The session was grueling. Carson paired her with opponents of varying species, each presenting unique challenges. One had a tail that lashed out with incredible speed, while another could manipulate gravity in a limited radius. Riya adapted quickly, relying on her agility and strategy to compensate for her opponent's physical advantages. As the session ended, Carson approached her. You've got potential, he said, but potential isn't enough. You need to refine your skills, anticipate not just what your opponent will do, but how they think. I understand, Riya said, breathing heavily. Good, Carson said, because out there no one's going to hold back just because you're human. The days turned into weeks, and Riya threw herself into her studies and training. She spent long hours in the library poring over texts on alien physiology and combat strategy. She practiced late into the night, her body aching but her resolve unshaken. Slowly she began to notice a change. Some of her peers began to approach her, curious about her abilities and her background. Others kept their distance, their disdain evident. Drax, meanwhile, remained a constant shadow. Though he didn't confront her directly, his presence was a reminder of the unspoken tension that lingered between them. One afternoon, while studying in the library, Riya felt a presence behind her. She turned to see Lorik, their antennae twitching nervously. Riya, they said quietly, I heard something. Drax is planning something. I don't know what, but it's not good. Riya frowned. Thanks for letting me know. You should be careful, Lorik said. He doesn't take defeat lightly. That evening, Riya returned to her dorm feeling uneasy. The message from Drax, Lorik's warning, it all pointed to something brewing. She knew Drax wouldn't let her victory stand unchallenged, but she didn't know how far he would go. The answer came sooner than she expected. The following day, during a routine training session, the simulation suddenly changed. The holographic jungle flickered and shifted, replaced by a barren wasteland. Riya looked around, confused, as the other students murmured in surprise. Before she could react, the terrain erupted. Massive mechanical constructs emerged from the ground, their glowing eyes locking onto her. It was a combat scenario, one far more advanced and dangerous than the standard training exercises. Riya, Carson's voice crackled through the comm system. This isn't part of the session. Stay alert. Alert. The constructs charged, their movements precise and deadly. Riya dodged the first strike, her mind racing. This wasn't a random glitch. Someone had tampered with the system. She fought with everything she had, using the environment to her advantage. The constructs were relentless, but Riya's training and instincts kept her alive. As the final construct fell, the simulation ended abruptly, and the training center lights flickered back on. Carson stormed into the room, his expression dark. "Everyone out," he barked. As the students filed out, Riya stayed behind. "Who did this?" she asked. "We're investigating," Carson said. "But I have a feeling you already know." Riya nodded, her jaw tightening. This was Drax's doing, she was certain of it. And if he was willing to go this far, she knew she couldn't afford to let her guard down. That night, as she sat in her dorm, her datapad chimed again. This time the message was brief but clear. "This isn't over." Riya stared at the words, her resolve hardening. She had come to Hextar Academy to prove herself, and she wasn't about to back down. Whatever Drax had planned next, she would be ready.